You told me. Yeah, he did. That's really good.
It's anniversary next week.
Is it already?
Yeah. Understand. Takes a while and they actually affirmed me last time.
Oh, really?
Now that I got a connection.
Okay. Should I mute it? Yes.
Can you hear us?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Right. My video.
Jackie, you lost your streaming.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right, my apologies for the delay, and let's get started. First thing, before we start with the formal agenda, I do want to welcome some new members we have. Superintendent George Beach has been appointed to fill the law enforcement spot. He could not be with us today. I think there's a funeral of a state police member that he's attending, but he is now a member of the commission. We also have Jerry Mowen, who's been appointed. Jerry is serving as the head of the Office of Forensic Services at DCS right now, and he's been appointed to fill that position. So Jerry is with us. We also have Benjamin, is it Oster?
Oster, yes.
Who has been appointed to fill the spot that is on recommendation of the private defense bar. I think that was a spot that Peter Neufeld had previously held. So welcome and thank you for being with us. And then finally, David Loftus has been appointed to fill the spot that is recommendation of the public defense bar. That's a spot Marvin Schechter has filled that role for some time now. Marvin has been gracious enough to serve for several years in a holdover capacity. And certainly I talked to Marvin yesterday and said this, but I'll say it publicly. He's obviously put a great deal of time and effort into advocating for the position he was appointed to advocate for. Was gracious enough to serve in a holdover capacity for, I think, a period of time well beyond where he wanted to serve. But Marvin, just publicly say what I told you yesterday. I can't tell you how much I appreciate everything you've done for the commission, and what you've done to represent the viewpoint you were appointed to represent. I think you've done a great job, and I think you've made us a better commission for it. So thank you very much for your service. And then, as I said, David Loftus has been appointed to fill that spot. It's my understanding David has accepted that appointment, but is just has a couple of administrative issues on his end that he's working to take care of, and hopefully we'll be ready to sit by the next meeting. So we look forward to having you on the committee. I believe.
No plaque, nothing, a watch for the guy, nothing.
No, special exceptions.
We have a plaque. It's sitting in Albany, Feds, for your knowledge.
I thought my words meant more than a plaque. Come on.
They did to me, Mike.
All right, so with that, the next thing we have on the agenda is review and approval of our meeting agenda. I believe the agenda has been circulated to all the members. Does anyone have anything, any discussion or conversation regarding the agenda? And if not, do I have a motion to approve the agenda? Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next item is the minutes from our March 21st, 2018 meeting. Again, I believe those have been circulated. Is there any discussion? And if not, do I have a motion to approve the minutes from our March 21st, 2018 meeting?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you.
I abstained too.
Okay, so 3 abstentions? All right, the next set of items is our accreditations and laboratory updates. Our first item for accreditation is the Erie County Forensic Toxicology Laboratory. I think the supporting documents are between pages 6 and pages 58 of the materials that were sent out. And this is a reaccreditation, and there is a vote that's needed. So is there any questions or conversation or discussion? And I think, do we have Christine Griffin with us? Oh, I'm sorry.
So I guess it's just the SOPs in
Yes.
the laboratory. Is there any, there's still SOPs circulating that are uncontrolled? How do we know that every examiner has the proper SOP?
So right now, we require them to print the SOPs, the official control documents are the ones in Qualtrics. At the recommendation of the ABFT, what we are doing is having them turn in, when a new version is issued, having them turn in their old, and we will document that at this point, going forward.
Any thought of just becoming electronic with SOPs?
There is some thought. We're not set up right quite yet. That's one of the things that we're working towards over the next probably year, to become much more electronic. Right now, everything is in paper. So we would like to move into electronic. We just don't have the electronic infrastructure to support that at this time, but that is something that we're working towards.
Okay.
Christine, just to clarify something, in page 55 of our documents, it talks about the refrigerators and the temperature gauges. I think you said, and you're correct, in the resolution was there was going to be, every working day the refrigerator is going to be checked. Is that correct?
That is correct.
It's just that in page 55 of our documents, it talks about the specimens could remain in this refrigerator for up to 60 hours, Friday afternoon and over the weekend. So that seemed to be an issue that the assessors were bringing up, but I don't know if you work Monday to Friday or Saturday, Sunday?
We do not work on the weekends, that is correct. I think their big concern at the inspection was our general walk-in refrigerator freezer where all of our specimens are kept, and actually they misunderstood that is actually still being monitored by the hospital.
Okay.
And we're working with our new construction to install a monitoring system on all of our refrigerators and freezers once the construction is complete. Right. And that will be able to be monitored by us. So it will no longer have the responsibility of the hospital. So the only thing that they might be in that's not monitored, and I don't have a solution for that, would be the temporary storage refrigerator. One of those we've taken out of circulation. So we still monitor it, and we would document, on Monday if we noticed any discrepancies.
Only because they mentioned it specifically, but again, you're doing a daily monitoring Monday to Friday.
We do.
And, which is more than what you were doing in the past.
That is correct.
But also you were doing more anyway. There's just a misunderstanding as well. Is that correct?
Some of it was a misunderstanding.
Okay.
That is correct.
Okay.
And can you just clarify the statement, account for testing performed in locations other than Erie County?
So we actually perform testing for counties outside of Erie County. However, our manual only mentions Erie County, and that was an oversight on my part.
But you're doing them in your lab for other counties?
That is correct.
Okay. Thanks.
Other counties in New York State?
That is correct. We do Chautauqua, Cattaraugus. Occasionally we help out with Niagara if they, so like carbon monoxide or something. So there are a couple other counties we do testing for.
Just I had one question. It's, I think, page 55 of our materials. At the very end, there's a concluding summary with comments, and they make, I think it's a total of 5 suggestions. What's the status with regard to the suggestions that they've made?
The suggestions are, so we've actually, again, the validations that they talk about, we actually do that where they, we look at structural issues when we look at interferences as well. So I'm not sure why they didn't pick that up. We actually spend a lot of time looking at structural interferences as well as other drug interferences. So I thought that was, either the inspectors must not have realized it because of they only examined one validation summary. So it might have been not as highlighted. One of the things we are working on probably over the next year, definitely before the next inspection, is having a standardized validation summary so that everyone follows the same format. Right now, as people perform validations, they write it up basically on their own. So we would like to have a standardized format for that.
This question might not be for you, Christine. It actually might be for ANAB, but it was just that I wasn't familiar with the ABFT program as much, so I'm starting to understand a little bit better. On page 51 of our documents, it talks about the toxicology laboratory doing, and you're one of them, some of the labs don't do this, analysis of non-biological samples.
That is correct.
So would that be powders? Tablets?
Usually it's not, it could potentially be powders. Usually what it is syringes. Syringes found at the scene, we might do a wash of the syringe. Our lab, our policy is we only do that analysis in conjunction with a death. Right. So essentially, if we found no other toxicology findings and drug evidence was submitted, we might do analysis of the non-biologicals at that point. What I've explained to the police agencies is we will not issue a report on that evidence. It would be contained on the final report that we did the analysis, what we saw in conjunction with the death report. So we feel that actually issuing a report on the non-biologicals, on powders and something like that, is not necessarily our place. Right. So that's how we differentiate it. So essentially, we only analyze that if we found nothing else toxicologically significant.
Okay. I think it was more. Thank you for that. That clarifies it. I think it was more that if ANAB is going to do a toxicology laboratory in the future, and they do maybe tablets or prescription drugs, would that fall under controlled substance analysis? Would that be now a discipline that the toxicology laboratories would have 2 disciplines? It would not just be toxicology. It would be controlled substances. Would that be a yes, Pam?
That would be a yes.
Yeah. So that's just something. I know some toxicology, because again, I'm not familiar with the ABFT program. Some laboratories do not do non-biological, and some. So that may be something we need to consider, for the next couple of years as we move towards ANAB or an accrediting body.
Okay.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you.
Questions?
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I had one
That's
more.
fine.
It's more of clarification. So the issue of qual versus quant?
Yes.
Like, is it just sheer numbers? That's why the quality assurance person looked at quals over quants?
So that was actually kind of a strange finding to me. First of all, it's not possible for one person to do every piece of data review in a laboratory.
Especially the qualitative analysis, just to look at everyone.
And she does not do every single qualitative analysis either, so I'm not sure why the inspectors felt that she did. We actually have a couple of procedures, relatively new procedures. My general feeling is that somebody who did not perform that analysis, as an analyst, should not be reviewing it. So it's my quality assurance person had never performed quantitative analysis. Okay. So I'm not, you can train somebody in it, but if you haven't actually performed it routinely yourself, I feel that you don't necessarily, have a full grasp of it. And so again, I'm like, is she never allowed to take a vacation? I'm not quite sure how that would happen.
My issue was, normally it's if there's an issue with a quant, a value's out of a range, it goes to the quality department. But I thought everything was being reviewed by analysts and supervisor, and then going to the QAS person also?
No, she actually helps out our laboratory by performing the qualitative reviews for many of our analysis. It's just for staffing purposes. We found that data analysis is actually a huge bottleneck. Thank you. I was trying to think of the word in our laboratory. Especially, I have a lot of new personnel, and I don't allow them to perform data review. So, I have a very limited number that perform data review. So to relieve some of that bottleneck, she actually does the initial review or the reviews of several of our qualitative analysis.
Okay. Thank you.
Ben?
Yes, this will be reading from page 9 of the materials. Occasionally, errors or deficiencies may be uncovered, which apparently there was no formal written reporting procedure. If the error, it describes it, if the error or deficiency uncovered is sufficiently serious, how do you determine whether an error is sufficiently serious to report to the client?
That is actually a challenge. That one of the things that we're working on as a TOCS twig is to figure out what, again, because we're not an ISO laboratory, I know that they have very formal requirements as to what's reported. We definitely let everybody know if we need to reissue a report. And, otherwise, if it's caught in-house, if it is caught by our in-house quality program, and no report goes out, we document it on a spreadsheet, which is turned over to DCJS, and we've actually had a lot of conversations regarding that, because they see everything from all the different labs as to what's significant and what's not.
I took the client to be perhaps the prosecuting agency.
It could be the district attorney's office, the physicians. It depends on which discipline.
But in terms of, from the criminal justice perspective, if there is a deficiency, wouldn't you report any deficiency? You wouldn't have a subjective standard for what is sufficiently serious to report. I mean, if there's an anomaly.
If there's an anomaly, it is documented on the case, and that is turned over to the district attorney upon requesting any materials associated with that case. So should there be a QC that fails, for instance, that's probably our most common, deficiency. So your QAs that you run, your quality materials that you run along in a batch might not meet the specifications. We don't report that to our client. All we do is rerun the case, because at that point, none of the data. However, if they ask for the materials associated with that case, all of that gets turned over. So we hide nothing.
So the initial test as well as the rerun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's clearly documented. This failed. It was rerun. We will include all of that quality assurance material, and they would clearly see that there was an issue. And I would actually go over with them with the material as well.
Wait, any other questions? All right. Thank you. Do I have a motion to renew the New York State accreditation to the Erie County Forensic Toxicology Laboratory for a period concurrent with its ABFT accreditation? That would be July 1st, 2018 to June 30th, 2020. Get a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is the Monroe County Medical Examiner Toxicology Laboratory. And again, the laboratory is up for reaccreditation. There is a vote needed here. I believe we have Director Rebecca Hartman in the Albany location. Does anyone have any questions or any discussion with regard to this agenda item?
I do. Good morning.
Good morning.
This is Lydia DeCastro. I have a question about D10, about the chain of custody nonconformity.
Lydia, do you have the page?
Oh, I'm sorry, 74 of our document. So, you responded by saying that you respectfully disagree that you are not in conformity with this particular standard. So could you describe for me your batch form, because the standard talks about it doesn't have to be in a Z-style chain of custody, but does the forms that you use still show some way of who has the specimens, and if you look at it, you could see, well, analyst A had the specimen this morning and analyst A put it back this evening.
Yeah, so I think there should be an example of one of the batch forms. I don't know, I haven't seen your book yet, I don't know what page it's on, but we actually sent, along with our response documentation, examples of all of these things. So it's on page 116 would be an example, and it shows you the case number and the sample, where the sample came from, and the date that it was removed from storage and by whom it was removed.
Can you tell me what the top of the page says? Sample log, is this sample log quant, ephedrine and pseudoephedrine?
Yes.
Okay.
And this would be attached with the rest of that particular run.
Okay, so it says removed by and the date, but at some point it gets returned, correct?
Right. So basically our policy is to keep things out of storage for as little time as possible. So you remove something and you work with it, and then it's immediately returned to storage.
So you make a note of when it's removed, but you don't make a note of when it's returned.
Correct.
So when you say a little bit of time, is it assumed that a little bit of time is the same day?
Yes. If it's if there's some sort of anomaly where someone would accidentally leave something out for an extended period of time, that's always documented on the case, but that rarely occurs. So this would be the sort of thing where you would take your specimens out long enough to aliquot them and then replace them within storage.
So then the default idea is that, other than the fact that if it's not returned within a prescribed period of time, then you would make a note that it wasn't returned. But other
Correct.
than that, it's assumed that it was returned in a short period of time.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah,
Scott?
sorry. Morning, Rebecca. This is Scott O'Neill. How are you?
Fine, thanks. How are you?
Good, thanks. I just wanted to ask, you had given a 7-page response to ABFT, and it seemed that there was only an email response saying that all of these non-conformities or recommendations have been addressed. Is that the only other records you have at this time? Yes?
You mean Graham's response to us saying...
Yeah, it was an email. Is that the only response you have from ABFT?
We also received a more official email from Dr. Goldberger, I believe, saying that it was approved and we'd be receiving our certificate. The certificate hasn't come in yet, but we were informed. I thought CCGS was copied on that one.
There might be here, there's a lot of records. The reason I was asking was just that it seemed to be that there was a few non-conformities as per the report from ABFT, but your detailed letter seemed to address that. But the report still stands as no, it's a non-conformity. And again, I apologise, I may be comparing it to the ANAB form, where it talks about the conformities being resolved. So it would just be something, I think, moving forward. That format makes it easy as a commission member to read and understand that that bullet was a non-conformity, but is now being addressed by the laboratory director, and there is a document other than a one sentence saying that, yes, we've addressed all your non-conformities. You've addressed all the non-conformities. Because there just seemed to be a very good letter back, addressing it all, but it was like a one sentence back saying, okay, we were not, I don't want to say they were wrong, but they were agreeing with your point of view. So maybe that's not a question, maybe that's just a statement, sorry.
That's okay.
And then I do have one last question. It talked about lithium testing, that you may want to consider referring that out to another laboratory. Have you made a decision on that?
We haven't officially made the decision, but I'm leaning towards taking that out of our testing.
Okay. And the carbon monoxide testing that's done by another laboratory, was that Christine's laboratory? I think she just, no. So is the carbon monoxide, is that something you will be continuing to do with another laboratory as well?
No, we do plan to continue our carbon monoxide testing.
Okay. So I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I apologise. It says that you're not performing proficiency testing for carbon monoxide. Is that something you feel you will be doing in the future or not? The proficiency testing?
Again, we're looking into it at this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Rebecca. It's Pat Buffalino. It's not even an analytical question, but the finding that there were personal records in the training folders. Is Monroe going to continue to keep those records in their training folders? And it was a suggestion.
No. Well, so we may put those in a separate location, but we will remove them from the documentation that we turn over to ABFT to simplify what they have to review.
Okay. It was a matter of who has access to these training records, and if there's personal information there, it might be a problem.
It doesn't ever leave the laboratory. It's only something for the inspectors to look at to ensure that all of our people have the adequate training and background.
I have another question. Regarding the finding G12, excuse me, about validation records being incomplete. So what is your point of view regarding what they, I'm sorry, this is page 111 of our book. It says, for example, they do not include carryover studies. There are limited interference studies, no dilution protocols, and no stability studies. So they're pointing this out that it's not there, but then later on in your response, which is on page, starting on page 112, you do say that you recognize that these are things that you may need to evaluate, such as carryover being evaluated by injecting a negative. So you do recognize that these are issues that need to be dealt with in some way. So I would like to understand better why it doesn't need to be part of a formal validation study.
Well, so it's something that we do routinely do. It's just that it doesn't make it into that format that we keep in our validation records, but we can produce the data if necessary. So we do evaluate carryover based on, in every run, based on injecting a negative after our highest standard. And we do evaluate interferences. It's not that we don't feel that it shouldn't be part of the validation. It's just that the idea is when you have a case and a new drug and you need to get a response out, it doesn't always make sense to hold the case up for 3 to 5 months to do that full length, all those pieces in place, including stability up front. So that's something that we believe is more beneficial to be performed longitudinally. And having spoken with various people who wrote those accreditation standards, that was the idea behind it when they were originally written.
I understand this a little bit better. So if you needed to take care or evaluate some new sample, you felt that the time factor involved in trying to validate just to analyze that new sample was time prohibitive? So you would address it kind of as needed if you saw that there was a problem as you're running the sample? Or maybe I'm mistaken.
Well, so yes, you can do you can get the certain pieces in place that are needed, and then as you run regularly, you can establish those other pieces. It's just that we don't have all of them put into our formal validation documents.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. With regard to this item, we also need a vote. So do I have a motion to renew the New York State accreditation for the Monroe County Medical Examiner Toxicology Laboratory for the period concurrent with its ABFT accreditation, which again would be July 1st, 2018 to June 30th, 2020? All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And any abstentions? So that passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item we have is the New York State Police Crime Laboratory, and I believe we have Director Ray Wickenheiser at the Albany location. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Any questions or discussion with regard to the New York State Police Crime Laboratory? Again, this is a reaccreditation. So Pat.
Hey, Ray, it's Pat here. Ray. I've got a question for you. So, just from materials, it seems like you're being placed in the same situation as the DC lab, but I'm not getting that from reading it. From what I understand from DC, what they did was combined RMP plus, haploid plus CPI, and that doesn't seem like the case in New York State. So could you just explain to me the actual situation? Because I don't believe it was mixing haploid statistics with CPI.
No, we do not mix our statistics. Now, I'm not really familiar with other people's audits. We could really speak to our own. So we do not mix statistics. And, again, just from what I'm aware of that particular situation, the auditors went in and chose to, make a finding that was more significant, including recommending discontinue analysis until it was straightened out, and that was not the case here.
Okay. That's the only question I have. Thanks, Ray.
Thank you.
Ray, you've seen the letter from, is it Tiffany?
Roy.
Tiffany Roy? Have you seen that letter?
Yes, I was provided a copy, yes.
Okay, could you just respond to that? And before you do, I just want the record to be clear that prosecutor in that case, the guy was convicted of murder. All of this material, contrary to the assertion in that letter, all of this material was turned over to the defense counsel, and the issues were fully debated. And for whatever strategic reason, the defense lawyer chose not to call Ms. Roy. But again, I want to emphasize that all of this material was turned over. So can you respond to that, Ray, please?
I guess I just wanted to note that this case is still not fully concluded, so at the wish of the commission, I can discuss it, but just wanted to make that note. Okay, so certainly we take every complaint very seriously. So really just being provided I guess, the opportunity for an oral response, we will issue a full written response to each point. There's over 8 pages in that particular complaint, a lot go into a lot of detail. So really, from kind of at its face, she issues a lot of concerns about how we did our validation study, concerns about the mixture interpretation. So really, from our view, that's the whole point of having auditors who come into the lab, who go through these cases and do a very detailed analysis of what we're doing. They ask questions of all of our individuals. And not only do we welcome it, we welcome the findings because it's an opportunity for improvement. So in the case of all of these, there was things that were seen, as you can see, that there were nonconformities, and those are our opportunities for improvement. And in each of those cases we went through, we made necessary improvements, and probably for the most part, there were a number of things where we did a very extensive validation as we moved up to global filer, new systems of quantitation, and so forth. And in making those improvements, in a number of cases, they recommended that we ran a few more duplicates of the various runs, and particularly ratios in the areas where we make decisions. So typically we got 4 to 1 is where we're declaring majors versus minors and so forth. So they saw that they felt that they needed additional replicates. So we did all of those improvements. We made them to the satisfaction, and it's a 2-part process, as you're aware. First, we respond to the auditor's findings, and we say, here's our plan. They approve that plan, and we work with them to approve that plan or get it to something to their satisfaction. Then we actually execute it and demonstrate to their satisfaction we've done it. So we did do that, as well as go through the DNA subcommittee who thoroughly reviewed this. So my view is to certainly we'll provide a written response, because that will take a little bit of time. We take it seriously, and we'll go through it, and we'll respond to each one of those particular points that you brought up. But on the overview, we feel that we've addressed them all. And that we really take it seriously, and we welcome the improvement, but all of that was done to the satisfaction for DNA, to the DNA subcommittee, but also to the auditors who performed a very thorough audit.
On a different topic, Ray, you're aware of some of the concerns that my colleagues have regarding the Y screening process that you use at the lab?
Perhaps if you could elaborate on that.
Well, in a sexual assault case, as a prosecutor, I want to be able to tell the jury that the DNA found on an item of clothing, a swab, underwear, whatever it was, is actually not only the defendant's DNA, but is his sperm, as opposed to saying it's just male DNA and it's consistent with him. Do you understand the?
Oh yeah, I better understand. Yeah. So what the commissioner is referring to is a plan that we have in place to go to what is known as direct to DNA. It doesn't really refer to the audit. It's really a separate issue. So what over the years, it's really the progression of techniques to recognize that when you have a sexual assault occur, you may have very, very low levels of sperm, or for that matter, even epithelial cells. If the person happens to have had a vasectomy, the various reasons why, you may have very low sperm counts. So the technique we're proposing is really to use the more sensitive DNA quantitation system that we validated to then say whether there's male profile present or not. And if there's no male DNA that's present, we can reasonably say, well, there's no sperm there. Okay, so the idea that we certainly can look at those samples and then determine that there is sperm, but it's a matter of reversing what we normally do. So the older technique would be look for sperm first, then go to DNA. What we're really talking about is looking at DNA first to determine is there male DNA present. It's more sensitive. We're talking about improving the flow of what we do. So we're not taking away analysis. It's really a matter of, that's why we'll have open meetings to discuss what we're doing in terms of trying to attack the backlog more expeditiously, but also to do it more effectively with a better technique.
So if the directed DNA method is used, as a prosecutor, I could come back to you and say, I'd like you to go further and determine whether or not sperm is actually present in this sample. Article.
Absolutely.
Your staff would do that.
Yes, absolutely. So we're not giving up anything. What we're trying to do is improve the sensitivity and do a better job. But however, I've got a director of our bioscience here, Julie Pizzichetti, who can provide a little bit more detail on that initiative. Julie?
Good morning. Just with respect to our directed DNA approach, which we haven't yet implemented, we actually had a WebEx presentation to allow information and to get questions and respond to those questions. And we are also planning to hold a customer working group, so we haven't implemented that process yet. I just wanted to clarify, we chose in our workflow to retain sperm search. So that's not something that we're going to go back and do upon request. We actually are going to do it as a routine part of our workflow. And this workflow is specific to items within sex offense kits. So we are retaining traditional serology on non-kit items in sex offense cases and other cases. But we recognize the value of including a confirmatory test, which is the microscopic identification of sperm. So that is included in our standard workflow in the directed DNA approach.
Thanks, Julie.
If I can ask just a clarifying question on that, it seems to me there's a number, so one is the sperm, and I think you referred to sperm, but doesn't this issue also involve a presumptive test for semen, or isn't that part of this process, and isn't this part of the issue that you had raised, Bill?
Yes.
Well, is that presumptive test going to remain, or is that something that's getting dropped out of the process?
The presumptive tests, which our lab considers presumptive to be the Brenamine test, looking for acid phosphatase, which is a color change test, and also the membrane-based test for prostate-specific antigen, which is a protein at high concentrations in seminal fluid. Our lab considers both of those to be presumptive tests. Those are going to be dropped from the direct-to-DNA workflow. But again, we chose to retain the confirmatory test for seminal fluid, which is the microscopic identification of sperm. And again, this direct-to-DNA approach is specifically for swabs and items in sex offense kits.
So I do want to just add another note, and that is this is the direct-to-DNA approach was actually recommended by a best practices panel, which was instituted by the National Institute of Justice. So that is a direction that the entire kind of industry, so to speak, is moving in, just using a more sensitive technique when you're looking for male DNA in the cases of sexual assault.
But this is not an accreditation issue. This is a separate
but
discussion.
To be clear, I'm getting confused about the order. You're going to do DNA for DNA containing Y DNA, right? And then only if you find Y DNA are you going to do the confirmatory microscopic tests for evidence of seminal fluid and semen, right? And
no,
sperm.
that's actually a little bit out of order. We do the sperm search earlier on in the workflow.
So even before you do the DNA analysis for the Y-bearing DNA, you're going to determine whether or not there was seminal fluid or sperm, right?
We're doing a microscopic, we're preparing slides and looking for the presence of sperm on the microscope slide as an earlier part of the workflow. We use the male screening to help identify the swabs in the kit that contain male DNA. But as part of the processing of all those sets of swabs, we will be looking for the microscopic identification of sperm before we actually amplify the DNA and get the DNA profile.
So does that answer your question about are you or aren't you getting evidence of sperm along with your DNA?
I'm going to have to ask, commission members can speak, but we can't have noise from outside the commission members.
Yeah, let me just suggest this, Ray. Would you be willing to sit down with a group of prosecutors and discuss this issue at greater length? rather than.
Well, absolutely. We are going to be sending out an email invitation. I'm sorry for responding on behalf of the director, but we are going to be sending out an email invitation to all prosecutors to participate in a customer working group, which at this point we're planning to hold via WebEx. So we absolutely understand that this is a change in the protocol, and we want to hear questions and provide information.
All right, Ray, I'll call you sometime this week, try to set something up.
Yes, the answer is yes, and certainly we welcome your inclusion.
Yeah, the concern is that sperm search doesn't, in the experience of some people, doesn't work very well on some things like clothing. But again, this is not an accreditation issue, so thanks for the...
And also, just to clarify, we're not doing the directed DNA approach on anything other than a pair of underwear that may be in the kit. So this is not something, every piece of evidence in a rape case, including other items of victim clothing, suspect clothing, bedding, towels, anything we might typically encounter in a rape case. We are not doing the directed DNA approach on anything other than the items in the sex offense kit.
Then
If there's going to be such a meeting, maybe defense could have a seat at the table, so we could be informed, so it's not such a steep learning curve when this finally does come to fruition.
We are working with New York State Police Council to actually develop the invitation, so we can certainly take that into consideration.
I'd be available.
Now, if I could, getting back to accreditation, there was a question raised with regard to the DNA testing process and the timing with regard to when a known offender sample is analyzed and results are obtained, and when a forensic sample is analyzed, and whether or not that known sample results would be known to the examiner at the time they're doing the forensic sample. Could you describe for me what your process is in that regard?
All our protocols and analyst training and the additional training that we conducted as part of our response to the audit finding has always emphasized that the evaluation interpretation of the evidence profile must be done prior to any examination of the suspect control. So our analysts are looking at the data associated with the evidence profile, determining whether it is single source, whether it contains DNA from just one person, or whether it is a mixture. If it's a mixture, they're determining how many potential contributors are in the mixture, other information such as if it appears to be the presence of at least one male in the mixture. And then we have extremely detailed protocols that address looking at the peak height ratios and looking at our DNA data to determine if there are components of the mixture, such as a major contributor or a group of alleles, the DNA typing markers, that are significantly above other low-level data that would be suitable for interpretation. That is absolutely always done before any reference, looking at any reference samples.
There's also an issue raised with regard to the generation of the report from ANAB, and I don't know if this is for the state police, ANAB, or for both, but can you describe what happened here with regard to any draft reports that may have been done in the final report and what that process was?
Yeah, so I'll speak to that. So part of the audit process is that every day, at the end of the day, there's a meeting between the lead auditor, myself as lab director, the quality manager, David Polakowski, and essentially perhaps any one of our lab leadership who may sit in, where there may be some discussion over potential nonconformities. So that's part of the process. As things come up, we have the opportunity to discuss them, bring up any concerns or whatnot, or objective evidence that perhaps this particular finding is not actually not a non-compliance. So those discussions are ongoing, as is when a draft comes out. So we were given a draft. Findings those are not finalized, and so we're wording. There were some typos, and in fact, there was a finding that was missed, so to speak, as in the previous discussions. They'd indicated there was a finding, so we actually asked for and had a finding put back in that was missed in that first draft. So it is a draft. We absolutely have discussions over clarification and making sure that it is the most correct document from the draft to the final stage. So that does take place, and to me, that's a normal part of the process.
ANAB's perspective, is there anything that you want to add to that? Does that accurately describe the process?
Want to come to the table?
So my understanding, I'll say yes. Director Wickenheiser, I think, has characterized what occurred properly. My understanding is twofold. One, he mentioned the non-conformity that wasn't there, that got put back in. That was in the QAS audit document. It just did not get carried over per our practice to our 17025 nonconformity report. So that's why that was added back in. And then secondly, there was language changed on one of the nonconformities subsequent to that initial report being left with the laboratory. But we do a quality review of those reports before they get finalized. Our accreditation managers try to do that while the team is on site so that no changes take place after the fact. That doesn't always get completed based on everything that we've got going on and the availability of the accreditation managers. So I do know that the nonconformity that was changed did get reviewed by the accreditation manager, and that based on the information provided by the lead assessor in her communication with a DNA technical assessor, that the current language of the nonconformity, which is in that final report, was accurate. That's my understanding at this point. But we also received the complaint from Ms. Roy, so we'll be doing our own follow-up of that as well.
You'll keep us apprised?
Oh, yes. You'll get a copy of our result on that.
Yes, Mr. Wickenhauser, I'm somewhat familiar with the reports. I practice in a county that is serviced by the state police lab. And in the case that's subject to some criticism, there was what appeared to be a final report issued on November 17th that later has a line drawn through it that says draft. That was the report that excluded the defendant in the case. And then the new report was issued December 8th, 2017, but it's not titled the report, it's titled supplemental report. Now, if it was a supplemental report, I would assume there was an original report, and I'm not seeing one. The only original report would be the report which excluded the defendant or the target in the case. Can you explain why the final report is listed as supplemental in the absence of an original report?
Yes, because there's a report that you're not referring to. So the case originally had no suspect. So the samples came in, they were analyzed, a mixture was found, and that mixture was determined by the analyst to be suitable for comparison. So as Director Pizzichetti had referred, that is our practice, so that that mixture was interpreted and there was no suspect to compare it to. So at a later time, the case was now resubmitted, had a suspect included, and then that comparison was made. So the one that you're referring to that said draft was an internal document that had not been made final. It was not released. And through our series of quality reviews, which is part of our accreditation, one of the reviewers indicated to the analyst that there may have been an error made by the analyst. The analyst went back and then in turn made some corrections. Now, all of that went into the full case file, was fully then disclosed to the prosecution, who turned it over to the defense, who in turn involved Ms. Roy. So that entire case documentation is us doing our job, completing all of those reviews, making corrections where necessary, and in turn including all that documentation in the case file, which then in turn enables individuals like Ms. Roy to then flag or indicate these are things that may or may not have concern. All of that took place. Defense was eventually then provided those materials through the appropriate disclosure, and we were the ones who in turn documented that, documented the change, and all of those things are provided in our case file, which was then disclosed.
I'm not quarreling with the fact that it was disclosed, but the November 17th report wasn't titled a supplemental report. And if what you're saying is this was supplemental to the original investigatory report, then the November report should have been titled supplement, even in draft. And it, other than the signature lines, it appears that it was a report ready for signature. I'm speaking of the November 17th iteration. It wasn't labeled supplemental. The only one that's been titled supplement is the December 8th.
Okay, so the analyst...
You answer. I just want to ask one thing to clarify. The materials or reports that you're referring to, is it fair to say those are not things that were in the materials that were circulated to the commission? Those are things you brought from somewhere else?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
With respect to the word supplemental being at the top of the report, it's my understanding that that designation of the report as supplemental is not applied by our laboratory information management system until the report goes through the end stage of review, the approval, and the signatures are applied. At that point, there's coding within our LIMS system that recognizes that report is, there have been previous reports issued in that case, and the word supplemental is attached to the final document with the signatures. It is part of the generation of the final official report with the signatures. Is that point the supplemental is applied to the report.
Do you have any other questions for the State Police Lab?
Oh.
Yes.
No, I don't.
I would note that, and I believe the letter is in the materials, the DNA subcommittee did review the accreditation documents and did vote to make a recommendation to us that the lab be reaccredited. So that's now in front of us. So do I have a motion to renew the New York State accreditation to the New York State Police Crime Laboratory for a period concurrent with its A and AB accreditation? All right, do I have a second? Second. All right. All in favor? And I would just ask, I need people to make sure that they motion one way or another so we can get the vote down. All right. Anyone opposed? All right, so get one, and then any abstentions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
A quick question for maybe DCGS. Just there was a lot of material, but in one page 377, names were not redacted. Some names were, some names weren't. And I know there's a lot of work. I'm not criticising. I'm just wondering if there was a logic applied for those names not to be redacted.
If the name is someone who falls in the key or top management of the laboratory system, those names remain.
Okay.
If they're not, they would be redacted.
Okay.
Thank you. And then in that regard, I believe in the materials, there's also two letters, one from April 20th and one from May 30th of this year with regard to key and top management and change in key management. Police, is that correct? Next item we have is the Niagara County Sheriff's Office Forensic Laboratory. Again, this is a reaccreditation. There is a vote needed. I believe we do have the director with us in Albany. Does anyone have any questions or any discussion with regard to this lab?
I do. Good morning.
Good morning.
This is Lydia DeCastro again. Regarding the update of your hair analysis procedure manual, oh, it's actually not, maybe it's not an update, but I did have a couple of questions.
Okay.
You referenced 2 articles about hair analysis, and in our booklet it is page 435. So you referenced 2 articles about hair analysis. Are those considered definitive articles that your staff would rely upon to refer to when it comes to hair analysis?
Yes, those were actually the articles that he had used prior to when we didn't have the procedure in the manual.
You have one analyst in the lab who does hair analysis?
Just one analyst, that's correct.
Okay. I was looking on the FBI website, and they do have a few more articles there, and I was just wondering whether there was any consideration to maybe expanding what it is that you refer to, because both of these, one is 20 years old and one is 41 years old. I don't know whether there's any that are maybe a little more current that could add to, the work that's being done, but I just thought I would mention that.
Oh, okay, yes, we can take a look at that. Thank you.
And then on the following page, 436 in our booklet, at the bottom of page 5 of your manual, you have some qualifying statements. One says, it should be noted that microscopic hair comparisons are not a means of absolute personal identification or individualization, or hairs do not possess sufficient individuality to be used as the basis for positive identification, and it goes on. So my question is, does each report include the qualifying statements, and are both used or can either be used?
I would have to refer to our analyst to answer that specifically, because I am not 100% sure. If we could contact him, I don't know. He is available if you need that answered.
I have a phone number. You can call.
Yes, please. While we're waiting, let's see, I think I had another question. Well, I'll wait till we speak to him, and then because it's a different section.
Reached the Niagara County Sheriff's Office Forensic Laboratory. We are unable to take your call.
All right, that's
there should be someone there.
In the meantime, I did have another question about your drug analysis manual, and I'll just choose a page at random, page 454 of our book. I think after every method, you add a 1x quadratic calibration curve model will be used for all analytes. So is that part of the process of preparing the calibration curve part of the process, and is that actually somewhere within the pages of this manual, or is it in a separate, say, quality assurance manual that they refer to that's outside? Because I didn't see any methodology for preparing a curve in here.
That was added because we didn't specify that in the method. I am not 100% sure, though, if it is just in a different section that wasn't updated, so it wasn't submitted. But that was just to satisfy the requirement that we add that to the manual. I don't know if that answers your question.
I understand.
Pat, did you have a question?
Do you want me to?
You can jump in, Pat, yeah.
Hi, it's Pat Buffalino. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you. I've got one question based upon the precision and accuracy, or possibly just the precision on your calibrators. So it looks like during interviews it was determined, and I'm on page 430. I'm sorry, I never called a page out. It looks like based upon interviews there was consensus as to what were the acceptable values of precision and accuracy. Did you guys go back, especially on quant cases, to actual case data or QA data to assure that everything was still within limits?
Yeah, so what happened was on the interviews, everyone said they were using 4 points, but in the manual, it never got switched to 4. It said 3.
Okay.
So it was just a manual error that it wasn't revised in a timely manner.
So it was just a matter of a 3 and a 4 point calibration
Correct.
curve, not
That's
that your precision values or your accuracy values were out of range.
Right. It was just that the manual said 3, but when they interviewed the analysts, they all said 4. And so we just
Okay.
need to revise the manual.
That's my misunderstanding. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I have another question for the fiber analysis section. Is the same analyst who does your hair and fibers also does your hair analysis do your fiber analysis?
Yes, he does.
So on page 503 of our book, you've made a change and it says all scopes, meaning microscopes, shall be adjusted for color illumination on a monthly basis prior to use in casework. So before, I believe it was assumed, based on my reading, that the analyst would check for color illumination before every use. So now that it's being changed to a monthly basis, how does can the analyst tell if it is not in color illumination, and how easily can it be taken out and put back in?
So the actual finding was the manual said at an as-needed basis. So it wasn't clear when he was doing color illumination, and then he never did the color illumination. So he did do the color illumination for I think 2 months now, and he didn't see a difference between when he hadn't performed it to now. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Do you want me to try back?
Yes, please.
Hello? Hi, Brandon. You're on with the commission.
Okay.
I think there's a question coming your way. Hold on.
His name is Brandon. Hi, Brandon. This is Lydia DeCastro, one of the members. I have 2 questions for you. One is in regards to your reports for hair analysis. And there are qualifying statements that could be added to a report regarding the type of conclusion you can make regarding a hair comparison. Are either of those qualifying statements added to every report that you issue?
Those statements would be added whenever a comparison is actually conducted. Sometimes there's just an initial examination.
Okay.
But if he performs a comparison and issues a report that compares of his findings with the comparison, then he'll add those clarifying statements.
Great. My second question is in relation to color illumination. Does the examiner, can the examiner, or is there some sort of notation that the examiner makes prior to using the microscope that says, okay, the microscope is set for color illumination before they actually start their analysis?
Color illumination is really kind of like an adjustment to optimize the actual optics or the visual picture that they're seeing through the microscope. Generally, if the analyst is having trouble seeing through the microscope, he's going to be concerned with kind of one of the first things he does. So, according to him, he's never had any issues during casework where he's had trouble with the picture through the microscope. So right now, he does it every month before he does the first case of the month, and then he keeps that on a log with each microscope.
All right, so he does log the fact that the color illumination is adjusted on a monthly basis.
That's correct.
It's my understanding that it's only been logged for approximately 2 months?
About 3 months now, yeah.
3 months. And from each check, there hasn't been a readjustment that needed to be made because it may have come out of color illumination from the prior month?
No, there is not.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have a question, Brandon. Have you testified in court in the last 5 years about hair comparisons, non-mitochondrial DNA or non-nuclear DNA hair comparisons?
We don't do mitochondrial DNA here. I can ask our hair analyst, he's sitting right next to me. Mark, have you done any testimony on non-nuclear DNA in regards to hair comparisons? No, he's not.
So nobody from your lab has testified in court that the suspect or unknown hair came from the defendant?
Have you ever testified that an unknown hair came from a defendant in the court? No, he's not.
All right.
All right, any other questions?
Thank you, Brandon.
Do I have a motion to renew the New York State accreditation to the Niagara County Sheriff's Office Forensic Laboratory for a period concurrent with its ANAB accreditation? All right, I have a motion from Scott, a second from Scott. Scott and Scott.
I won't do that again.
You've been waiting for that all morning.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, anyone opposed? All right, any abstentions? And again, so I need, Ben, I think they're struggling to register whether you're voting one way or the other. Okay, so you voted in favor on that? Okay, thank you.
Can I ask one question before she leaves? Are your lab protocols published?
They are not published, no. They're on our server at the lab.
I mean, are they available for review?
If you wanted to make a request for them, yes, we would be willing to give them to you.
Thank you. And just as a note, I believe the materials also contained a letter dated March 16th with regard to changes in key management for this lab as well. The next item we have is the Suffolk County Crime Laboratory, and again, this is a reaccreditation. There's a vote needed, and I believe Bob Jenna is with us here. Is there any discussion or any questions with regard to this lab? All right, if there's no questions or no discussion, do I have a motion to renew the New York State accreditation to the Suffolk County Crime Laboratory for a period concurrent with its ANAB accreditation? All right, do I have a second? All in favor? Anyone opposed? And any abstention? Next item is the Suffolk County Medical Examiner Toxicology Laboratory. Again, this is a reaccreditation. There is a vote needed. And I believe the director, Michael Lehrer, is available by phone if we have questions. Is there any questions or discussion?
I have just one question about it's more to do with, it says here that his chemical hoods aren't working, and I was just wondering, it seemed to be like a statement none of them are working, and I was just wondering if we should get that clarified. You know, it's not really significant, but
Yeah, and he's available, so we might as well get him on the phone and ask him. I was going to get the answering machine.
Mike Lehrer speaking.
Hi, Dr. Lehrer. This is Shelley Palmer at the commission meeting. There's a few questions for you.
Sure.
Hey Mike, it's Scott O'Neill. How are you?
Hello.
Mike, just a very quick question. I noticed in the documents it talks about that your hoods were not functioning properly and there had been a request submitted to Suffolk County to repair or replace them. I was wondering if I could get an update on that.
Sure. It's not in our lab by itself. It's the entire building, which includes also Department of Health labs and the crime labs and ourselves. And it's a building-wide ventilation system. So they have about $3 or $4 million budget as a county at this point, and they've started work on the entire ventilation system, which will include the hoods. In the meantime, about a third of our hoods are working fine. About one third are not as effective, and one third are not working. What we've done in the past year is essentially taken out all the volatiles and all the solvents where extractions and evaporations occur, and we've put them in the working hood. So we are in good shape in terms of the South lab, but we are dependent on the county doing this multi-million-dollar project which they've initiated to take care of things.
No, thank you very much for that detailed update. Thank you.
Doctor, are your lab protocols available for review?
I'm sorry, can you speak up?
Your lab protocols, are they available for review?
Sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Sure thing.
With regard to the Suffolk County Medical Examiner Toxicology Lab, do I have a motion to renew the New York State accreditation for that lab for the period concurrent with its ABFT accreditation, July 1st, 2018 to June 30th, 2020?
Motion.
All right. In second? All right. All in favor? Anyone opposed? And any abstentions? Next, we have the Erie County Department of Central Police Services. This is for informational purposes. There is no vote required. There was a letter dated March 7th regarding change in key and top management.
Can I just make a point?
Yeah.
I think, again, that in my opinion, if we don't have a CV or at least some statement of the qualifications of the new person, this is pretty much worthless in terms of us assessing anything. And I can understand if people don't want to submit their CV, but at least if in the letters they could say, you know, this person has 4 years as quality assurance experience in this capacity, give us some reassurance that they're appointing a proper person.
I guess I would disagree that it's worthless, but I also agree that there would be value in having that information. Can we work with the labs and see if we can get that included moving forward? I'm getting yes, so thank you. I appreciate that. Next item we have is the Monroe County Crime Laboratory. This is for informational purposes. There's not a vote required. We have Director John Clark in Albany. Materials you have, I think it's pages 761 to 788, with regard to assessment findings, corrective action plan, and additional materials. So any questions for John Clark? All right. Next item we have is the Nassau County Toxicology Laboratory. Again, this is for informational purposes only. There's not a vote required. The director is available by phone if we need him. There is a letter in the materials with regard to the mid-cycle review and attached documentation. Any questions or discussion? The next item we have is the New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner, Department of Forensic Toxicology. And again, there's no vote required. This is for informational purposes. And again, this is a letter from April 13th with regard to the reassignment of Assistant Director and a mid-cycle review checklist. Any questions? Thank you. Next, we have the Onondaga County Forensic Toxicology Laboratory. And again, this is for informational purposes. There's not a vote required. And there's a mid-cycle review checklist in the materials, as well as a letter with regard to continuation of accreditation. Any questions or discussion? Next, we have the Westchester County Division of Forensic Science. Again, this is for informational purposes. There's no vote required. Bob Adamo is available by phone if we need him. And there's correspondence in the materials with regard to updated scope and continuation of accreditation in the surveillance report. Any questions? And the next item is the Westchester County Division of Forensic Toxicology. Again, for informational purposes, no vote required. And the materials contain a mid-cycle review report. Any questions? So I think that completes our accreditations and lab updates. So the next item we have on the agenda is old business. And the first item we have is the accreditation comparisons. There are a number of letters in the materials. This is something that's been ongoing for several years. So we've heard from ANAB, we've heard from A2LA, ABFT. Is there any additional discussion? At some point, I think we need to make a decision as to what we do. And I don't know, from a lab director's perspective, if you have any insight for us.
We had our NICLAC meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we discussed that again. We do, of course, like the idea of competition, but we're all concerned about flipping back and forth between accrediting agencies. So we feel that one entity would be the best for, maybe not, I don't want to say that entity, but we think it is ANAB. But the point being is we do not want to go back and forth between entities. But I would like to add something that came up from the discussion, was that in prior discussions we kind of talked about funding, because there was going to be, the toxicology laboratories are moving towards the NAB, so there'll be a funding issue for that. But also a lot of the lab directors are going through their assessments now, as we've been going through this morning, and those assessments are under ANAB, and some laboratories have seen an increase of 352% in cost for that surveillance, for that assessment visit. Some are only 36%, 66%. My own laboratory was an 87% increase. Now, granted, I'm comparing numbers from 5 years ago, but 87% 100%, 30% is significant, and it's just something that we all have to be aware of, that, you know, there is an increased cost. And I'm not sure if it's to do with ANAB or just to do with, you know, 5 years have passed in time. But I think that's why the NICLAC was concerned. They wanted me to mention it. You know, we are seeing an increase in we need funding to help with this increased cost. And there may be changes in ANAB, maybe we'll speak to it, but I know some laboratories haven't seen some changes in their surveillance visit because they haven't happened yet. Or the annual fee. One laboratory, there was a slight reduction in their annual fee. So I don't know how it all falls out because we haven't went through that whole process yet.
If I understand the concern with flipping back and forth, would it be accurate to say there are some labs that are concerned that if there's a choice of two providers, that they might be required to bid it competitively and might be put in a position with no choice, but having to go back and forth because of the competitive bid situation?
Yes.
Yeah, so for one 4-year cycle, you have ANAB, and then you're forced to put it out to a competitive bid because of your county or municipal procedures. And the next time around, you're doing A2LA, and then you're back to ANAB, which I assume would be quite disruptive.
Yes.
All right. And I also have heard from many lab directors about concerns with what they feel are really significant cost increases from ANAB. I know Pam is here. I don't know if there's anything to say on it other than I think ANAB should be aware of the fact that, you know, this is a concern for lab directors, and it's a concern, at least speaking personally, as a commissioner, I see it as a concern for the commission as well. You know, and I would hope that if the commission does decide to use ANAB, that ANAB wouldn't take advantage of that situation when it comes to pricing services. Go ahead.
I was just going to add, maybe, Pam, if you could join us, because maybe there was something that we could ask. There was also a comment about, you know, and I was at the ASCLD symposium, and I think, Pam, you gave a presentation, maybe. Someone gave a presentation from NAB about the difficulty you were having because of the frequency of the laboratories in the first, this year and next year in regards to assessment, getting the appropriate number of staffing to do the assessment. And you were addressing that. But there was some comment from NICLAC, from different lab directors, saying that, you know, they weren't getting assessment teams set up, you know, and maybe 1 or 2 weeks prior to the assessment, and actually one assessment had to be delayed. And then there was also a lot of the assessors are volunteers from our laboratories. So ANAB is reaching out to get the qualified individuals, and we want to be part of that. But the notification we're getting was very short in regards to that. The concern we were bringing up is ANAB is a large organisation and has a large infrastructure. Some of the other accrediting bodies are not as staffed at the level of ANAB. So there was a point, it might not just be a funding issue, but if ANAB, in our opinion, is having a slight issue meeting these all assessments, how are these other two accrediting bodies, how are these other bodies going to keep up? So again, I don't know if it's a valid comment, but it was a comment from NICLAC that I wanted to share.
So I believe it was Laurel Farrell who made the presentation at the ASCLD symposium. So I'll try to address all of that. Let me know if I left something out. For the increased costs, it's definitely something that I can go back and look at from our records to see where the increased costs are coming in. I can tell you we have changed our surveillance visits from what they used to be. And when we do a surveillance visit now, those are those mid-cycle visits, we have a certain percentage of the laboratory's scope of accreditation that we're going to look at. Previously, we would look at one. We'd send one technical assessor. We'd look at one thing. The laboratory had 9 different disciplines on their scope of accreditation. Then we were not looking at all of those 9 disciplines. We were taking a very small sample size of what their accredited scope was to review during that particular visit. We have changed that, and we have increased the sampling, and so that will in turn increase the costs to the laboratories, because that means there are additional people that we have to send as part of that surveillance team. So that could be where some of the increase is coming from. I know some of the increase also comes just increase in travel costs and things like that as well. But I will definitely and look at the differences in the New York labs and the costs. As far as getting short notice on teams, yes, as Scott said, we went through a period at the beginning of this year. It was like the last couple months, April and May, where we had a tremendous amount of reassessment activities going. That had to do in part because we used to be on a 5-year cycle, and we moved to a 4-year cycle, and we let labs apply last minute when ASCLD Lab was making that transition to the international program from the legacy program, and we let labs apply last minute to get reaccredited one more time under that legacy program. That has come to a head, and we are now, reassessing. They had their initial assessment. There's a lot of labs that are up for reassessment all at the same time now because they got crammed into a very small time frame. So we have done a couple of things. We did move some of those assessments, and we're trying to spread that out. We're looking at our scheduling to see if we can, there are some labs that we can move and just keep them permanently in that other month, as opposed to we moved them in May of this year to August, but they want to go back to May next year. We try to keep the lab in the same month going forward. So that's one of the things. And then the other thing is when we have that many assessments going on, and based on the size of our teams and the number of people we need as the technical assessors going in looking, that with all of those going on at one time, that really depletes our assessor pool. And it's not that we have a small number of assessors, but as Scott said, our assessors come from these government laboratories, and a lot of times they need 30 days notice or more. 30 is like a minimum to get approval to go. And so once we get behind on scheduling, it made it just that much worse, because then the last minute requests, people weren't being able to get approval from their agency to go, or their agency was really scrambling to try to get them approval. And so we are in the process right now. We're actually putting together assessment teams through the rest of the year. We've changed our process. We had been using a scheduling process that was primarily one person putting the teams together. That clearly came to a point where it didn't work for us anymore, so we've got 3 additional people involved in scheduling on a regular basis. We also have the accreditation managers working on that, and we're getting the teams plotted out from now through the end of the year so that we can avoid this going forward.
Now, I did write you a letter on April 30th. We sent a chart asking for information with regard to the fees, and you did respond and indicate that you were not going to provide the information because you felt it would negatively affect your ability to compete for business outside New York. And I understand that, but if we decide to continue using ANAB, what, if anything, can you tell the Commission about whether or not labs, what labs can expect in terms of rate or fee increases going forward, if we, in effect, continue to have you be the only player in this field as opposed to opening it up to multiple accreditation bodies?
So the information that I could give you at this point is we don't have any intention of changing our fee schedules right now. The only reason our fee schedule changed is because when ASCLD Lab combined with ANAB, we had 2 different fee structures, and we were trying to find the structure that worked best, and basically did not increase costs to laboratories, but that has not worked out the way we thought it would based on all of our projections for all labs. And so we need to go back and look at that, but certainly our intent was not to make it more expensive for laboratories to become accredited. I don't know, not having the information in front of me about the fees that we charged 5 years ago versus the fees that we're charging now, and the size of the assessment team, and were any disciplines added to that laboratory's accreditation over that 5 years, because certainly that's going to add something to the reassessment cost too. I can't really tell you a lot right now about where the fee increases came from, but I'm certainly willing to go back and look at that information to see. But there's no plan to continually increase the fees.
I certainly appreciate the statement that there's no plan to increase them going forward. I do struggle a little because what I just heard you say about the intention was not to increase fees doesn't really fit with what I'm hearing from lab directors about what they've seen in practice.
And so one of the things when we did the new fee structure was we did recognize that for some laboratories reassessment costs would go up, but annual fees would go down. So the cost of accreditation overall for the entire cycle there was minimal change, and that's we had to do it that way in order to make it work for both the former ANAB customer base and the former ASCLD lab customer base. So the goal was the overall cycle of accreditation. The fees did not substantially change. And so that's why I want to go back and look, and I don't know if Scott's willing to share with me the labs that had the big increases so I know where to target my...
I will speak to those lab directors. I'm sure I'm willing, of course.
Okay.
And I think, from my lab, unique because of the size, but we top out at a certain point, right, because we've got so many additional people that we don't... I think it'd be interesting, to say, because we haven't had our annual fee, and our annual fee is significant as well. So if the annual fee next year is being reduced, then maybe it does all balance out. I don't know, because I don't know what the annual fee is, because we just went through our assessment. But our assessment was 87% greater. So it's $30,000 more for the assessment, and we did not change our disciplines. We did have an increase of 50 personnel. I was already at 250, so it wasn't, that wasn't going to change the number. So I think it'd be good to share it. And maybe we don't need numbers. We just need percentages increase and where they believe that money's coming from. It might be travel, it might be commuting. I don't know.
All right. If we could ask you to work with Pam on that, and I would also ask you to share with whoever's involved in the fee structure at ANAB the Commission's concern about the impact that this is having on labs. Funding is incredibly tight, on the local level right now, and there are certainly advantages to us having one provider, but we don't want to be taken advantage of or have the labs be taken advantage of. And so I just want to make sure that message gets to people who need to hear it.
I'm just trying to either by NICLAC or by the office to survey our labs and ask them what their costs have been annually over the last 2 or 3 years of their last cycle, because I was totally taken aback by the figures we did get from one certifying agency, and A2LA's numbers. Anyways, I think we need to know what our labs think they're paying for this process.
I think if we work with Pat, because the thing is, most of the labs just went through ANAB assessment, so the cost that Pam is suggesting that might be reduced, they would have that prospective number. We don't have that prospective number, but we have the back number. But yeah, I think working together, we'll be able to give the Commission a better perspective.
Yeah, and we'll certainly work with Scott and try and pull that information together.
But I would think that our decision about whether we make any changes in any direction have to have a cost consideration.
I know what you're saying, but I think I don't know if cost is the issue in moving forward, because this has been on the agenda for many meetings, and cost is cost. It does cost to get it done. So again, going by what Pam's saying about the surveillance visit and the annual fee may have decreased compared to the assessment. Again, I understand what you're saying. I just the numbers I saw from other accrediting bodies, they didn't make sense. Not the number was fine. The actual amount seemed okay, but it's
how the chart fit together.
How the chart fit together didn't seem to make sense. But it does cost a lot of money for them to do the assessment. It costs us. I don't think. Yeah.
Would it be fair to say from the lab director's perspective that the general feeling is that the cost issue is a significant concern, but you would rather have one entity than be put in a position of having to go back and forth every 4 years?
Yes, I believe so. I mean, we have lab directors at the table,
That was the consensus.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that, moving forward, because that's what we're saying, we want to move forward. We can't keep status quo.
I guess my personal feeling is, I do think we've looked at this in incredible detail. We've heard from everybody, we've analyzed everything, and I hear your concerns, Ann, and I think they're valid, and I think, Pam is telling us that she'll work with the directors, to try and, understand the issue and do what we can to provide the service that we need at a reasonable price. So from my perspective, I don't know that we're ever going to get any more information we have now. So I would be comfortable moving forward.
And I also think that we've got the toxicology laboratories. I've now got a deadline, I believe, of 2022. So we want to give them the right answer so they can move forward. In regards to getting meeting the standards and conforming. So I think again, I think it's a valid point, but I just think we should move forward with moving forward.
Any other comments, thoughts?
I do have a comment, just because it's a question I had, was during Laurel's presentation, I think there was a comment about having people strategically placed throughout the country, maybe, or maybe about facilitating the assessment process.
So that's one of the things we're working on, developing a database to, we have Qualtrics, we have, our own ShareFile site and stuff like that, but an actual database where we can start looking at things like not only technical assessor availability from our 1,200 volunteers throughout the year. When are they available? Pick a week, let us know, we'll get you scheduled then, but also where are they located to try to minimize not only travel costs, but when do they have to fly in to get there? So if we've got an assessment activity starting midday on Tuesday, can they fly in Tuesday morning? That saves a hotel night. Do they have to get there on Wednesday or Monday? So there's just some different logistics things, and we also have lead assessors that are all over the country as well. But we don't want to end up just having one lead assessor go to the same area all the time. We want to keep that mix going.
Yeah. That was one of the things we were thinking about. We don't want that either. We understand we can have lead assessors that come back to the laboratories over a span of 10, 20 years. But we would not want that the New York laboratories are accrediting New York laboratories. And we want that outside perspective, that the different states. So the plan is not to do it like everyone's within driving distance.
Yeah.
The plan is still flying people in and just coordinate it better.
Yeah,
but not making it incestuous. Maybe I should have said that word.
No, I think that's
word.
appropriate. Exactly. We don't want that either. We want to make sure we've got fresh eyes going into these laboratories each time, and there could be a repeat over a period of many years, but we don't want to keep sending the same lead assessor.
I think also one of the issues was that it was somebody known to the laboratory from one of the adjoining agencies or one of the local agencies, and they had put in a conflict of interest, but they ANAB deemed that it wasn't conflict of interest just because they knew the lab and they were another New York State employee. So I think does that make sense? Like they would
Is
just.
that a lead assessor or a
No,
technical
assessor. I think it was a technical assessor at that point, but I
think it was just a disagreement. I don't think it was like personally, I would not want an individual who used to work for me to come back into the organisation. that's just my personal preference. Not that I don't trust their judgment, because it's not about that. It's just, they already know the players, they know the people. I want someone from outside who doesn't know my operation evaluate my operation. So, but that doesn't mean that I'm talking about an employee who's moved on in their career. I don't mean someone who's came and gave training or has been in the facility as a professional. So it's just, but I think there was one of the lab directors of NICLAC.
It was more of a, I would prefer not to have somebody from a New York State laboratory that 90% of our laboratory is familiar with. And it's, I guess you could perceive it, some will perceive it as a conflict of interest, others wouldn't. But I think that may have been it, and if I'm speaking incorrectly.
Well, I think what you said, that's not the plan. The plan is not to use it locally. The plan is to just coordinate it better.
Yeah.
Strategically.
I guess, I don't know, do you want to make a motion that we use ANAB?
Can you just clarify the input from the TOX folks on the ABFT standards? Because I don't know if that will get wrapped into it.
Christine is here that wrote the letter. If Christine doesn't mind, I'd like to speak for maybe a couple of sentences. Just that Christine was not at the NICLAC meeting, unfortunately. She had a prior engagement. So the letter was sent, Christine drafted it because the Commission asked for their opinion. So we discussed it a little bit more at NICLAC, and we all feel there's value in ABFT. We all feel that that's something we want to move forward with. What it was to do with, was it mandatory or was it optional? There was still some discussion there, not about, let me rephrase that, that's not accurate. The point is that the toxicology laboratories are all ABFT currently. And there's two laboratories that are not, they're not the New York State Police and Niagara. And those both lab directors were stating that they would prefer to wait to see what the new ABFT standards are before they move forward, because some of the ABFT standards are very specific to toxicology, such as you must be a toxicologist, the lab director, where Ray Wickenhauser is not a toxicologist. So when we let Christine speak, it was just, I wanted to make sure that not everyone was in agreement with this letter at this time, except we all felt the value in ABFT and what they were bringing to the table with subject matter expertise. Christine, sorry.
Thank you. So Scott is correct. I did talk to a couple of my laboratory directors about NICLAC. So we do feel that there is value in ABFT. However, due to the fact that some of the laboratory directors who were not toxicologists didn't quite understand the checklist, even though we tried to clarify that what they meant was, what the checklist actually means is that whoever oversees and signs out the tox cases must have that toxicology expertise. It's not written that way. And ABFT is in the process of updating their checklist. They hope to have it done at the latest, probably around February of 2019. That's if everything goes well. And so I think, from what I understand about the NICLAC meeting, is that they had agreed that it was probably in the best interest to wait till that had been rewritten before deciding about the ABFT portion, about whether it was required for all of tox labs in New York State.
And one of the things I'm struggling with is I don't have any understanding of what value, if we go to the ISO standard, no one's been able to explain to me in a way I can understand what value having the ABFT standards on top of that would add. And I guess your comment about, if labs feel from a lab perspective that they want to do that in addition, I certainly don't see any harm in that. But from a commission perspective, what I'm struggling with is, why do we need anything other than the one ISO standard?
May I address that, Commissioner? I think one of the big concerns is if it's not actually mandated by the Commission, we're going to have a very difficult time, even though Pam has told me it's about a $500 extra charge. If it's an optional thing, it would be very difficult for us to say we believe we need to spend this extra money when it's not a mandated thing. A lot of labs are put into the situation of it's a cost issue. And the real value is, so there are documents that are published. So for instance, there's a DUI publication, and it's been updated several times, and actually one of the people who, New York State Police is very involved with this, that are, these are what you should be doing as minimum standards for a DUI laboratory. There's another one for DFC casework, so drug facilitated casework. There's actually, these are the minimum levels that you should be at. This is what you should be testing for. This is what you should be doing. Toxicology specific documents. And I think one of the advantages of having an ABFT inspector is they look to see, are you meeting that? So whereas we feel that there's extreme value in ISO, do what you say and say what you do, they may not necessarily be looking, they come from different perspectives. And so an ABFT inspector does look to see, are you meeting the minimums that you should be performing this type of casework? So, for instance, per my inspection that you all the refrigerator incident, the refrigerator finding on my last inspection, I actually had talked to another ISO laboratory regarding that, and I was like, oh, I'm going to put in that we're checking our refrigerators once a week. He goes, well, why so frequent? And so I am like, well, why do more? We're going to say we're going to do it once a month. ABFT came in and said, that's just really not sufficient. We're concerned about this. This is why we feel you should be doing it. Okay, well, we'll do it every single day. It's what's to do in the value for the work that we're doing. And the reality is not every toxicology laboratory does every single function. Some do drug facilitated casework, some do not. Some only handle DUIs, some handle postmortem. And so you need, those are very, very different mindsets. Our lab handles 3 different types. We handle drug facilitated sexual assaults, we handle driving under the influence casework, and we handle postmortem. When I'm looking at those types of casework, they are completely different things that I have to think about with every single case. And so you need to have that type of expertise. I can't explain the value of why that is so important.
So let me ask this, because it sounds like there's still some conversation among lab directors on this issue.
Yeah, I think so. My point is this: is there a need to decide this part of it? If we, could we decide to go with A and A B? No, I agree.
And have you continue the conversation with the lab directors over?
That's what we feel. That's what I was trying to address from the letter, because the letter was definitive, where I think we could postpone until we get the standards in 2019 and reevaluate.
Okay.
And ANAB would run that program because it's falling under them anyway. You know what I mean? So it was just, yes.
So do you want to make a motion then to have the commission, I don't know if it's to continue our relationship or indicate that ANAB will be our accrediting body? Frank, I think we should not put a time frame on it, because if, for example, an exorbitant price increase, if something else came along, I think we want to have the ability to revisit it whenever we want. But
yes.
You want to make that motion?
Yeah, I'd make the motion that ANAB is the sole entity for accreditation in New York State at this time.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All right. All in favor? Anyone opposed?
I'm abstaining.
Okay, and any abstentions?
Opposed. I'm just not ready to make that conclusion.
Okay. All right, and then you will work with our staff and with Pam and try and get our arms around the fee issue?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
That does require reg language change, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Got to ask for that in the current regs.
Yes, okay. So we will, we'll have a proposed regs ready for our next meeting. Thank you. Next item, at the last meeting, if I'm not mistaken, I think there was a request with regard to memos or historical memos on confidentiality and open meeting law. So there are materials, I think it's from 844 to 851 in the binders, just for informational purposes. Next issue is an update with regard to familial search. Jerry or one of the staff, someone have the update for us?
Yes, on familial search, we have 15 applications in various stages of process. All the various forms, the trainings, the memorandum of understanding, they're all in final form. And as I said, they're just at different stages. Some are closer than others, but with the new memorandums of understanding, we had to do re-signings because some of the language is modified. But I think we're all the necessary parties are in agreement with the current forms.
It would be fair to say we don't have any case yet where anything has been released.
Correct.
Released or the search has been done,
We don't have anything where any information's been released yet.
but the searches have been done.
We're in that gray area where they can't tell us until they're officially can legally release to us, and so we haven't gotten a release yet.
All right, the next set of items on the agenda.
Mike, can we just go back to that for 1 second? Can you just let us know, it seems to be that this has been going on for a while. What is the holdup, just so that we can report it back to our members?
Yeah, I don't believe there's any holdup. I think there's a process, and the process involves the applications and the review. And when that process is finished, it involves the state police doing the actual work. It's not a snap your fingers overnight process. I think, I'm not aware of any holdup from my perspective. I think the process is moving as it should be.
Some I can say that there's during the initial applications, one of the regulatory requirements was that there had to be a showing that reasonable investigative efforts had been taken, and that's right out of the eavesdropping statute. So some of the initial applications, we sent back a request for further information. We got that. And there had also been some discussion about our original memorandum of understanding, whether it was everyone was willing to sign it. Now we've modified that. Everyone, we believe, is willing to sign in the current form. So all those things have been implemented and are in process.
And that issue had nothing to do with the testing. It was some indemnification language that was put in that shouldn't have been in there.
So it would be better, we could report back to the association that they need to be a little bit more thorough on their reasonable investigative efforts. Would that be something that would be more beneficial going forward? Or
I wouldn't say more. What I would say is that, if you were applying for a eavesdropping warrant, for example, I think you would be pretty thorough in terms of what you put in there before you went to a judge and asked the judge to sign it. And I would think that same level of care ought to be used here.
What's the time frame from the beginning of this process to where we are now? How long have these applications been in works? About just
months.
Late. We're in early 18. Late November 17 was probably when the applications began to come in, and
we approved
this
it
process.
in October, correct?
Yeah.
And we haven't yet gotten to the point where since no searches have resulted in possible matches, and that's the point at which the training is required for the agencies. So there's still that phase of this implementation.
The training is done.
Oh, they've been?
No. The
program is ready.
Yes.
To roll, but it hasn't.
Yes.
Nobody's been through it.
Correct.
But the applications have been granted to the extent that they are going to be, the search is going to be done. We just haven't, there just has been no release of any results, is that correct?
There are some applications that have made it to the point you just described.
Have any applications been rejected out of hand?
Yes, because they didn't meet the sample requirements. So for instance, there's a requirement in the current state police validated process that they had to have 15 Y loci. And there was a submission, for instance, saying that the sample only has 14 Y loci. So that would be a rejection at that stage because it doesn't meet the state police validated process. So there were, I think, 2 in that category.
All right.
Are those criteria, I know they're formalized, are they available?
Yes.
I think we could get you those. We'll get them to you.
Thank you.
As we go forward, what do you anticipate the turnaround time to be if someone was to apply? Is like right now, just because we're working through the creation, are we talking a 3-month turnaround, 6 months?
We're not in a position to answer that by ourselves because it's not our process. It also depends on the state police lab, and I don't want to speak for them.
Okay.
All right. I will say, I think our part of the process, will move faster. There have been, like, for example, the issue of the indemnification clause. That's a handout. It's not going to come up again. So I think our piece of it will move faster going forward. But next item we have is laboratory disclosures. The first item is the Erie County Central Police Services. It's page 853 of the materials. There's a letter from October 27th of 17 regarding the closeout of a proficiency test issue that I do believe had some implication on casework. Is there any question or conversation with regard to this disclosure? Next issue we have is from the Monroe County Crime Lab. I'm starting at page 856 of the materials, 856 to 916. There's a letter from April 20th of 2018 with regard to closeout and supporting documentation, and also an email from April 21st, which is an acknowledgement from ANAB. And I believe, again, we have John Clark with us in Albany if there are any questions. Are there any questions or conversation with regard to this disclosure? And actually, I think there's 2 with regard to the Monroe County Lab. There's a statistics issue which relates to the correspondence that I just mentioned. There's also a presumptive test issue with a letter and an email of the same dates that I just talked about. Any question or discussion with regard to either of those? The next disclosure we have is from the Nassau County Division of Forensic Science. It's from pages 917 to 919 in the materials. This has to do with a CPI calculation. There's a memo from April 13th, an initial notification. There's the acknowledgement from ANAB. Are there any questions or any discussion with regard to this notification? Next item or next disclosure we have is the New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner, Department of Forensic Toxicology. In the materials, pages 920 and 921, and then I believe also in our supplemental materials that were sent around, there's additional information. This relates to a reporting error. Again, there's a letter from April 20th with the notification of the reporting error. There's a root cause analysis dated May 31st. Any questions or any discussion with regard to this item?
sorry, what was the page? 992?
That one was 920 and 921, I believe, and then I think there was also materials number 801.1 to 801.14 in the supplemental materials that were sent out. And if I'm going fast, if people need a minute to catch up, just stop me. So next we have the next disclosures, the New York City Police Department Police Laboratory. This is page 922 to 931. This had to do with a disclosure regarding an incorrect weight. And actually, just looking at my notes now, I think that this is something that we need to take up in executive session.
Yeah, the 922 was for executive session, but there were an update. That was a disclosure, and then there's two other letters about an update from a disclosure from late last year. That's 926 and 928. Those are not executive session, but those are updates. Those are updates from the disclosures. If you recall, we do not have to, for A and B, we don't have to supply the fine-out closeout letter, but for the commission we do. So that's why this was sent.
So with regard to the matters that are not executive session, any questions for discussion? Next is the Westchester County Department of Public Safety Crime Laboratory. This pages 932 to 945. And again, there's a email from May 22nd. I'm sorry, no, it's a final root cause analysis report from May 22nd. And then an email chain with an acknowledgement from ANAB. Any questions with regard to this disclosure? Next disclosure is the Suffolk County Crime Laboratory, and it's pages 972 to 974 of the materials. And this is an initial notification and acknowledgement. Any questions or discussion with regard to this disclosure? The next set of items are items that need to be dealt with in executive session. So do I have a motion to go into executive session to discuss matters relating to either current investigations or matters that might lead to the appointment, promotion, demotion, discipline, or suspension of a particular person? All right, we have a motion. Do I have a second? All in favor? Anyone opposed or any abstention? All right, then we will go into executive session. I would ask both at this site and at the Albany.
I'm going to try and get an earlier one, but the earliest train I could get out of here was but it's just
I just
Going back to Rochester.
Yeah.
My flight, yeah. It was gone like all 5 days. Going out to dinner tonight. I had to pick the person's car to the airport. I figured I'd go straight to the airport to dinner.
That's
supposed to
but
end
this
at like
is
6
better,
o'clock.
so if I can get that 115,
Friends of ours.
happy camper, but we'll see.
One of my friends just needs to
Yeah,
that's what I was wondering, like,
I know. Well, even the one after that, but it sounds like it will go kind of mid-January with some openings, but then it does was locked out until later.
I wouldn't be doing
Just I looked at it.
We're all good.
But this week, New York Monday, Albany Tuesday, Orange County Wednesday. Here. All right, we are back on the record. At this point, I would report that no action was taken in executive session. The next meeting of our commission is September 12th of this year. The main site will be Albany. It will be video conferenced here. With that, do I have a motion to adjourn? Second, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right, thank you. I appreciate the work and the time that everyone puts in. Greatly appreciate it.
I don't even.
And to our staff, thank you as well. Appreciate all the work the staff does.
If